Tonight, the fallout over the leaking of national secrets by top intelligence officials intensifies.
It's equipment and technology that's not perfect, and probably he won't be using it again.
President Trump is defending his embattled national security advisor, the man who reportedly added a journalist to a Signal app group chat with the White House inner circle. But senators from both sides of the aisle are demanding answers from those involved. We talked to lawmakers from each party about what should happen next. New questions and confusion about the unexpected death of former Yankee star Brett Gardner's son. Authorities in Costa Rica have ruled out asphyxiation as a cause of death, contradicting earlier findings.
I don't think I've ever really returned to normal.
Life after lockup and unwanted limelight. Amanda Knox was convicted and exonerated of her roommate's murder. During that time span, she became a focal point of media scrutiny. Tonight, our conversation with Knox as she reflects on what has happened and what will happen next. They're inserting microchips in their bodies, trying to become one with technology. And they've created a growing community aimed at figuring out just how impactful their ideals can be. But what are the risks? In tonight's Prime Focus, meet the biohackers.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is Prime with Linsey Davis.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Linsey Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We begin with the fallout after that bombshell revelation of a major national security breach. Tonight, the White House and President Trump are denying any classified information was shared on the Signal chain. The Atlantic editor-in-chief Jeffrey Goldberg says that simply is not true. Moments ago, NSA Chief Waltz reacted, saying, "We made a mistake. We're moving forward." President Trump downplayed the lapse. He said no classified information was shared and attacked the Atlantic journalist. And on Capitol Hill today, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard and CIA Director John Ratcliffe testified before a heated Senate panel. Facing tough questions from Senate Democrats, we'll be joined in a moment by one of those Democrats, Senator Mark Kelly. And some Republicans on the Hill are also offering criticism, especially after the Secretary of Defense said no war plans were shared. Representative Don Bacon sharply critical, saying they ought to be honest and just own up to it. Representative Bacon is also standing by to join us along with Senator Kelly. Both sides of the aisle on this busy Tuesday night. Our Chief Global Affairs anchor Martha Raddatz leads us off from Washington.
Tonight, President Trump trying to downplay an extraordinary lapse in national security. Members of his inner circle, including Vice President J.D. Vance and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, reportedly discussing highly sensitive U.S. war plans on a commercial messaging app. All while a journalist says he was reading the messages in real time.
There was no classified information, as I understand it. They used a app, if you want to call it an app, that a lot of people use.
Trump defending his national security advisor, Mike Waltz, who Jeffrey Goldberg, editor of The Atlantic, said apparently inadvertently added him to the group on the Signal app.
He's a very good man, and he will continue to do a good job.
Goldberg says Hegseth shared operational details of the U.S. strikes on the Iran-backed Houthis earlier this month, including precise information about weapons packages, targets, and timing. Trump today asked if Waltz made a mistake.
No, I don't think he should apologize. I think he's doing his best. It's equipment and technology that's not perfect, and probably he won't be using it again. At least not in the very near future. What do you think?
Yes, sir. I agree with you. Let's get everybody in the room whenever possible.
Tonight, Waltz spoke out on Fox News.
I take full responsibility. I built the group. My job is to make sure everything's coordinated.
Hegseth overnight denied sharing sensitive information about the attack.
Nobody was texting war plans, and that's all I have to say about that.
But Goldberg saying that's simply not true.
No, that's a lie. He was texting war plans.
The hearing will come to order.
On Capitol Hill today, senators grilling two top cabinet officials who Goldberg says were part of that chat group, CIA Director John Ratcliffe and Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard.
I think this is one more example of the kind of sloppy, careless, incompetent behavior.
Georgia Senator John Ossoff suggesting the lapse could have put American troops at risk.
They're talking about the timing of U.S. airstrikes, correct?
Yes.
Yes, and therefore the timing of sending U.S. air crews into hostile airspace, correct?
Yes.
So the attack sequencing and timing and weapons and targets you don't consider should have been classified?
I defer to the Secretary of Defense, the National Security Council on that question.
Despite the administration's insisting war plans were not shared, some Republicans today not convinced.
Yeah, that's
criticizing the reporter.
That's baloney. I don't think they ought to just be honest and own up to it.
Our thanks to Martha Raddatz. Joining us now is someone who was in that fiery hearing in the Senate today, Arizona Democratic Senator Mark Kelly. Senator, thank you so much for your time tonight. You grilled DNI Chief Tulsi Gabbard and top administration officials about the texts in the signal chain. You got a lot of "not that I recall" and "I don't have any recollection." Were you satisfied with what you heard?
Absolutely not, Lindsay. I mean, we use these secure systems for a reason, and it's to keep people safe, service members, intelligence operatives, overseas. People know the way this is supposed to work, and this was a very big breach of the way we handle classified information. Discussing military strikes on a messaging app, and then not being able to answer the questions. Lindsay, you saw what I asked the DNI specifically about targets and weapons and operational plans. And you may have noticed some long pauses before answering. It shouldn't take that long to answer these questions, whether there were targets discussed or not. And that's the kind of information that, if it gets in the hands of our adversaries, puts pilots especially at risk.
Today, President Trump said, quote, "There was no classified information as I understand it." Curious how you understand it.
Well, that's what they said at the beginning of the hearing. There was no classified information. And then when we got towards the end of the hearing, what I noticed was a little bit of hedging. That, well, maybe when you consider intelligence information, there was no classified information, but they didn't seem to, necessarily agree that there absolutely wasn't anything else that could have been operational.
We spoke with the Atlantic editor-in-chief last night. He told us the information was sensitive that he has and that he didn't want to publish it because of its sensitivity. Should he publish the information if the administration denies texting about war plans when Goldberg firmly alleges that he has the texts?
Well, the president of the United States today said there's no classified information in there. So I think that probably gives him the ability, if they want to release it.
I know you also asked today if deliberations over whether we should launch a strike on another country is considered classified information. Just taking a step back here, what is your biggest concern right now about that signal chat?
Yeah, well, so when you're having a pre-decisional deliberation over whether or not we're going to launch a strike, airplanes, possibly missiles, at another country, this should be done in a secure facility. That facility exists in the White House. It exists in the Pentagon, all over the world, embassies. You have an opportunity to get into a SCIF. That should not be done on an unsecured messaging app. I mean, how ridiculous and dumb was that? And when I asked the DNI about targets, specifically discussion about targets, she wouldn't give me a straight answer.
Do you think even before that there is a sense that either Waltz or Hegseth should resign?
I think there needs to be an investigation and people should be held accountable. I mean, in the case of Hegseth, seems to me that if anybody was sharing classified information, that appears to be the kind of stuff that would have come from the Secretary of Defense. And as you know, I thought he was an incredibly poor choice for the job. So I didn't want him in the job to begin with, because I think he was not prepared to do one of the hardest jobs on the planet.
Senator Mark Kelly, we thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
For more now, we're joined by Nebraska Republican Congressman Don Bacon. Congressman, thank you so much for your time tonight. You've been sharply critical in the last 24 hours of that Signal chat. You, of course, served in the Air Force and have said that you would have lost your security clearance for a lot less. Should NSA advisor Mike Waltz resign?
Well, I think he's less at fault here. He accidentally clicked on the reporter's name, and I think most of the discussions were not highly classified until the Secretary of Defense put in the targeting information, what targets are being hit and timing and what kind of weapons. That's what the reporter is saying. He didn't publish that. But that was the big error, was putting in this targeting information 2 hours before the actual targets. And I will just tell you, Russia and China will make Secretary Hegseth's and Mike Waltz's cell phones a top target. These are unclassified. There's unclassified reporting that Russia has penetrated the Signal network. And so my point is, the intentional putting into classified, that was the biggest error. And it is a security violation, and it puts at risk our troops before they go into a fight. And so that's my perspective.
So do you think that Mike Waltz should resign?
I think his error was less critical. He accidentally hit this reporter's name, and his stuff was, he was trying to mainly coordinate some meetings at the cabinet level. The bigger error was when the Secretary of Defense.
So do you think Pete Hegseth should resign?
But he should take accountability. First of all, I support the attacks on Houthis. So I want to, with big picture, we needed to open up the lanes of navigation and allow ships to get through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. So I support the attacks that the administration has done on the Houthis. But when you have a mistake like this, to blame the Atlantic, to blame the journalist, I don't think it's appropriate. It's better, and I've served in the military 30 years. I'm a 5-time commander. When you make a mistake, you own it. You say, this is my fault. I was wrong. I take accountability. And that's what I would like to see. When you try to blame others, it's not good.
I just want to go back to this just for one more bite at the apple, because you've said that you would have lost your security clearance for far less. So should we have the people who are at the pinnacle of national security have no punishment?
Well, that's something within the administration they have to sort out.
The Atlantic editor-in-chief told us last night when we spoke with him that this could have been a lot worse if someone had been added to the chat, someone other than him. Some have said no harm, no foul. The White House has downplayed it. What should the administration be doing at this point going forward?
This is my view. If they want to have discipline and things like that, that's not for me to say right here. My point is, they should take accountability and say, I made a mistake.
You sit on the House committees on armed services and the House subcommittees on intelligence and special operations. Does the House need to investigate what happened here?
I think it's pretty open and shut what happened. The Atlantic did the investigation for us, in a sense. I mean, it's line by line, minute by minute review of what happened. Now, we don't actually see the targeting information, what weapons, and the timing, because the journalist, I think appropriately, didn't put that in there because he's trying to protect classified information. That may be one area that the Senate or the House could look at to see what was actually in there. Because I am, quoting the journalist saying, "Hey, I didn't put this in there because it was classified. It was targets, weapons." It may be worth us to see what was taken out of the chat, and it was done to protect our classified and also some of our intelligence officers that were on there.
Congressman Don Bacon, we thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Today, President Trump signed an executive order aimed at overhauling the U.S. election system, something he long called for on the campaign trail. The order is meant to cut down any illegal immigrants on the voter rolls, but will also have sweeping effects on how Americans can register to vote and on ballot counting. This comes after Trump and his allies falsely claimed that the 2020 election was stolen, saying without evidence that there was widespread fraud. There are new developments in the U.S. effort to end the war in Ukraine. Talks are underway in Saudi Arabia. Both Ukraine and Russia are agreeing to limit their attacks, including a truce in the Black Sea. Let's get right to our senior national correspondent, Terry Moran. Terry, tell us the latest.
Well, Linsey, this is a limited ceasefire, and there are already doubts about whether it can take hold, but it is the first significant step towards peace in the 3-year-long plus brutal war that they've been fighting. So under the deal, Russia and Ukraine have agreed to halt attacks in the Black Sea, where Russia's Navy has been getting battered and Ukraine's ports have been getting hammered. In addition, the two say that they will finalize the elements of a deal to stop attacks on each other's electricity infrastructure and facilities. That would be good news for civilians. Now, Russia does say that a ceasefire won't take hold until sanctions on their agricultural exports are lifted. The U.S. says they'll try to help with that. They will need, however, the agreement of the European Union. And right now, that will be hard to get, so still a lot of uncertainty here.
And Terry, there's news on another front tonight about a planned visit to Greenland by the vice president and his wife. Sounds like it's not a welcome visit.
Well, no, but he's happy about it. The vice president announced that he would join his wife, Usha, and their sons and top U.S. national security officials on this trip to Greenland, where they were already traveling on Thursday. And what is going to happen there is he's going to visit Space Force troops that are stationed there in an effort, he says, to, quote, reinvigorate Greenland's security. Now, President Trump has been pushing for the U.S. to take over Greenland. That's an idea that is rejected by the overwhelming majority of Greenlanders. And in fact, before Vice President Vance announced that he would be joining this delegation, the Prime Minister of Greenland said that the delegation was, quote, very aggressive. They don't like it. Lindsay?
Terry Moran for us there in the White House. Thanks so much, Terry. Tonight, a new medical report is raising more questions about the unexpected death of former Yankees star Brett Gardner's son. Authorities in Costa Rica have ruled out asphyxiation as a cause of death, contradicting earlier findings. Trevor Ault has the latest.
Tonight, a new twist in the investigation into the sudden death of the son of former baseball star Brett Gardner. A Costa Rican source close to the investigation tells ABC News the family went to dinner last Thursday at a restaurant near their resort. Upon returning, multiple family members fell ill and were treated by a medical team at the resort. But 14-year-old Miller died in his sleep Friday morning. Authorities initially believed he may have died from asphyxiation, but they're now ruling it out, instead looking into the possibility the teen may have been allergic to the medicine he was given. Officials now awaiting an autopsy.
During the autopsy, often toxicology reports as well as other studies are done to help get to the bottom and clarify exactly what was the cause.
But Costa Rican police say the autopsy could take months to complete, citing a backlog from the country's high number of homicides. The family was staying at the Arenas del Mar beachfront and rainforest resort. The hotel says they are fully cooperating with the investigation, telling ABC News the hotel staff dispatched a medical team immediately, including a licensed doctor, which arrived to handle the emergency situation.
Our thanks to Trevor. Top justice officials are refusing to hand over information on deportation flights because they say it's secret. The Trump administration invoked the so-called state secrets privilege to prevent a judge from learning more about the flights, arguing that disclosing the information would violate national security. The dispute centers on 2 planefuls of Venezuelan migrants sent to a notorious prison in El Salvador. The government claimed they were all gang members, but provided little evidence. The judge ordered that the government turn around the 2 planes while they were en route. The government failed to do so. Lee Gallant is the deputy director of the ACLU Immigrants' Rights Project. He's argued some of the country's highest profile immigration cases against the Trump administration and joins us now. Lee, thanks so much for coming back on. Tell me more about the state secrets privilege and what about its use here concerns you?
So 2 things are going on. One is that the judge has blocked the law from being used going forward, and we think that's absolutely correct. This is a wartime measure that the president is trying to use during peacetime. It's supposed to be used only when we are in a war with another country. He is claiming that we are in a war with a gang. Obviously, we are not really at war with a gang. The president, has signed this law in secret. It didn't get published till a day later. It was being used before it was even published. And the judge said, I want these planes turned around. We have real concerns that the government violated his order by not turning the planes around and bringing the people back, and the judge also has real concerns. So he asked the government some very basic questions about the flights. The government has stonewalled the judge and then finally now has invoked the state secrets privilege, claiming they can't give him any information, despite the fact that El Salvador put out pictures and videos about the planes landing with even their tail numbers showing, and the Secretary of State and President Trump have liked those postings. This is all about whether the judge's order was violated.
How does this process normally play out? How does a judge decide if the privilege should apply?
Yeah, so he'll have to look at the affidavits and decide for himself. What we are saying is that the planes were still in the air or on the ground in El Salvador, and the U.S. still had custody over these individuals, so could have brought them back. And that information is public, regardless of what's in the confidential affidavits. And we know that they could have brought them back because we already know that 9 people were brought back. The United States has done this unilaterally without any judicial process, without anybody knowing. When they got to El Salvador, remarkably, they sent a Nicaraguan man. El Salvador had to point out, well, we're not taking Nicaraguans. They had to bring the Nicaraguan man back, the U.S. did. And they also had to bring 8 women back when El Salvador said, no, we never agreed to take women. So they could have brought it back. The government's claim that it was not feasible to bring people back is obviously inconsistent with those basic facts and with common sense.
What happens if the Trump administration simply decides not to hand the information over and continues with these deportation flights?
Well, I think right now, whether they hand the information whether they hand the information over or not is going to play out in court, and let's see what the judge does. He has a lot of powers at his disposal, but going forward, I don't expect the administration to be violating his order going forward. And so they've appealed it. We had arguments in the Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit yesterday. The government's saying it's an intrusion on national security to stop the president from using this wartime measure during peacetime. We'll see how the appeals court rules. I suspect it won't end there.
How likely do you think this is to go to the Supreme Court?
Well, I think the government has said they will take it to the Supreme Court, and so we'll see how it plays out. We'll keep all our options open as well, but there's a lot at stake. If the government can say, we're going to just name any gang in the United States as alien enemies during peacetime and then unilaterally decide who gets sent to a Salvadoran prison for the rest of their lives. And so if we allow this precedent to go forward, we're looking at a very dangerous situation.
All right. Leah Gallant, we thank you so much from the ACLU. Appreciate your insight.
Thanks, Lindsay.
We're continuing to follow developments from the West Bank, where Palestinian filmmaker Hamdan Bilal was among those taken into custody by Israeli officials after a confrontation with Israeli settlers. Bilal was a co-director of the Oscar-winning documentary No Other Land, about a West Bank community attempting to stop Israeli forces from demolishing their villages. Activists have said that he was injured during an attack by settlers. Israeli forces say he was among those suspected of throwing rocks at police. Bilal has since been released from custody and from a brief hospitalization. Our Matt Rivers spoke with him today and joins us now. So, Matt, what did Bilal have to say about what happened?
What he said happened is that he was in his village where he lives, that there was Israeli settlers that came in, started attacking people, harassing people, something that he says has increased in frequency since his Oscar win. He came out and started filming the situation, as he is wont to do. That's what his documentary was about. And it seems like settlers noticed him, moved toward him. He ran back to his house. He was in the doorway trying to prevent people from coming inside. That's where his family was. And that's when he said he was severely beaten by several men. He described some of them as, quote, soldiers with guns, though he said he wasn't sure what, if any, government agency they were actually from. Israeli police and the IDF have both denied any involvement in these beatings. But he was beaten. There was an ambulance called at some point. It's unclear if he made it inside the ambulance before he was taken into custody. He spent the night in Israeli custody. He was questioned, ultimately released on his own self-recognizance and self-bail, as it's called here in Israel, and the investigation continues.
And any update on where Bilal is now in the investigation into this altercation?
Yeah, so he did get out of the hospital. He is back home with his family at this point, which he is very, very happy about. But, we did ask him, you're going back home to the same place where this happened, and could it happen again? I asked him, are you scared? Hamdan, are you afraid for your life?
After this attack, yes, I'm afraid. Really, I'm afraid. I told you, I feel when they attack me, I will lose my life.
But, Lindsay, I asked him, then why talk to me? And he said, because if I don't talk, then maybe nothing will ever change. So I hope in talking to you and publicizing my story that might do something, a little something, to change the situation over there. Lindsay.
Well, thanks so much for sharing a bit of that conversation with us, Matt Rivers. Our thanks to you. And still ahead, a brazen smash and grab robbery caught on camera. How much thieves got away with from a jewelry store. But first, they call themselves biohackers or grinders, looking to find new ways for people to meld with technology, their hopes and fears for the future this could create in tonight's Prime Focus.
I feel like the first people that can afford implants are going to be the millionaires. And a lot of the reason why the grinders do what they do is so that the technology can be for everyone.
Welcome back, everyone. We've all seen movies like The Matrix, which show characters who can blur the line between man and machine. In our current reality, some are on the same journey, putting technology inside of their bodies with microchips. But how high are the risks, and what are the rewards? And what could this mean for our collective future? ABC's Nathan Russo-Smith takes us inside the world of biohacking.
My name is Anastasia Sin. I'm a magician and a biohacker.
What is GrindFest?
GrindFest has been going on for about 10 years here in Tehachapi, California. And we attract people from all different genres.
Yeah, I have a master's in human anatomy.
I've worked as an interface designer for meditation and wellness apps.
People who are good with hacking electronics.
I'm an electrical engineer going to college.
We do some really wild prototype cardiovascular stuff.
People who are interested in inserting subdermal microchips.
I had a peg leg. The one I had like a terabyte of data. You can stream movies off of it.
And LEDs.
This is an NFC chip. This goes to my website. My house, my car, my clothes are my exoskeleton. Without them, I'm not exactly me. So adding more technology didn't really seem that weird.
It's literally a chunk of silicone with a battery and a circuit board.
If you are someone who hacks your skin with an electronic, we call them a grinder. Let's see what we got in the Dangerous Things kit of how to become a cyborg. All right, let's see what it says, shall we?
Hey, ABC News. Let me show you what a body can do.
Why did you get that first implant?
Because my daughter wanted one. I said, listen, I'm not sure how safe this is for people, so how about I go and I get one, and if it's safe, like after a year and I don't have any health problems, I'll even buy it for you. And she to this day doesn't have one, and I have 52. Yeah.
52, that sounds like an addiction.
A little bit.
Your hot take on the implants.
My hot take is proceed with caution.
What gives you pause?
Risk of infection, leaving it in the body, risk of inflammation, scar formation, long-term effects. And what happens when there are complications that we simply can't treat because we have devices in our body and we can't properly diagnose because the imaging is not compatible.
Yeah, I can no longer get an MRI. I've got magnets everywhere. Nope. You can even hear my hand because my hand has like 8 magnets in it. So my whole hand is now a speaker.
Blues.
When I had 48 implants, someone mentioned that I had the most implants of anyone they knew. And then I went and got 4 more just to get to number 52 because there's 52 cards in a deck and I'm a magician and it was a special number for me. Then Guinness World Records contacted me. It was a lot.
At some point, 100 years in the future, everything will be an implant.
When you guys come together every year, what is the big wish list item that you all hope to one day make?
The thing everyone wants is Neuralink. It's frustrating because it's out there, but we don't know how it's built. So if Elon was willing to open source all of his stuff like we do, that'd be great.
Neuralink is an experimental implantable brain-computer interface, a chip surgically implanted by a robot and connected by threads to a patient's brain that allows the patient to control a computer or smartphone with their mind.
That is the dream. That is the Johnny Mnemonic, everyone's favorite movie in biohacking.
Upload begins when you press here.
Or uploading information like in The Matrix.
What was it? I know Kung Fu.
There's definitely potential, but I do believe that we are very early in that science. The idea, something that you would implant into the brain can reveal these benefits, I think it would be really difficult.
When it comes to Neuralink, though, at the grassroots level, collecting information directly from your body in such an intimate way, that technology being owned and operated by some kind of external entity is a source of profound concern.
I'm trying to do blood glucose using vibrations with a small passive implant.
This is the bleeding edge. People taking their own autonomy into their hands and moving biomedical science and engineering forward.
What do you say to those people who might think this is insane?
To someone who thinks it's insane, I would probably say, just come hang out with us for a bit. I bet you any money by the end of the weekend you're going to leave with a microchip.
To our knowledge, he is still microchipless. Our thanks to Nathan for that. Coming up, what does America's disaster response look like without FEMA? We're taking a look by the numbers. Plus, a heartbreaking injury for one of college basketball's brightest stars. Welcome back, everyone. FEMA's days could be numbered. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says she's moving forward with plans to cut the agency. What could that mean for how America responds to disaster? We take a look tonight by the numbers. FEMA's budget this year is more than $33 billion. That's a lot of money, but it goes quickly. Last year, the agency spent nearly half of its disaster budget in just 8 days. The debate comes as extreme weather events are becoming more frequent and also intense. There were 90 declarations of major disasters in 2024. That's nearly double the annual average. 41% of the U.S. population lived in a county where a major emergency was declared. That's 137 million people. President Trump wants state and local governments to play a bigger role, but even Republican lawmakers have concerns about that. Any plan would involve a reduction in federal funding. Texas would be hit especially hard. The Lone Star State received on average $1.4 billion a year from FEMA over the past decade. With year-round disasters ranging from winter wildfires to spring tornadoes, there's no time to waste. Hurricane season begins in just 68 days. Coming up, it was the first of its kind. At one time, Napster was how much of the world streamed music. Now the company is changing hands. What's next for Napster's new era? Plus, her name and image became infamous after she was falsely accused of murder. Now Amanda Knox is reclaiming her story in a new book. Our conversation with Amanda is coming up. A smash and grab caught on camera. A Tennessee flamethrower sets a new record, and a sparkling water company cashes in on a viral video. Those stories and much more in tonight's rundown.
Music streaming and peer-to-peer pioneer Napster has been sold for $207 million, marking the third time in the last 5 years the company has changed hands. It was bought by the digital media company Infinite Reality. The company says its new direction will be to help artists create 3D virtual spaces to sell both physical and virtual merchandise. Napster's chief called it the beginning of a more interactive and social music experience for the next era of the internet. 3 teenage girls are in custody after allegedly planning to kill their mother because she turned off their Wi-Fi. Houston police say the girls grabbed kitchen knives and chased their mother onto the street, all while trying to stab her. The teens were arrested and charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. No one was seriously hurt. 2 men have been charged in a 2024 smash and grab robbery of $1.7 million in jewelry. Video shows the men armed with sledgehammers, smashing their way into display cases and grabbing diamonds and watches in broad daylight while customers and employees cowered for safety. Prosecutors say the pair returned to their New Jersey home with their ill-gotten gains while they took photos of themselves holding large stacks of cash. USC star Juju Watkins hurt her right knee in the first quarter of Southern California's win over Mississippi State. She was carried off the court, the school later announcing she was out with a season-ending ACL tear injury. Watkins will undergo surgery and then begin rehab. The Trojans won 96-59 to reach the Sweet 16.
New record-setting velocity pitch in this inning.
A record-breaking pitch for a softball standout. University of Tennessee pitcher Carolyn Pickens firing a strike in Monday's game against Knoxville, clocking in at 78.2 miles per hour, a new NCAA record. Pickens said she had no idea when she threw the pitch that she had made history.
And a viral morning routine by influencer Ashton Hall featuring Saratoga water bottles has reached nearly 1 billion views online. The viral video has even spiked sales for the company. Their stock is rising, and they have seen a 1,000% increase in Google searches, leading the company to post their own meme content celebrating the attention.
It's been almost 20 years since a college student's dream study abroad program turned into a nightmare that played out in the media internationally. In 2007, while in Italy, Amanda Knox was falsely accused of murdering her roommate. She was detained in a foreign country, only knowing some of the language, and was often sexualized in their reporting. After serving 4 years in prison, she was released in 2011 and fully exonerated in 2015. Now Amanda reflects on life after prison in her new book, Free, My Search for Meaning. Amanda, kind enough to join us now. Thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So at one point in the book, you talk about how you were stripped of everything, but you realized that you still had yourself and you were enough. Elaborate on that.
Whew, yeah, you picked you're starting off with a big, with a big
we start
revelation.
small, right?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, let's talk about how literally stripped down to nothing, and I was left alone for a lot of the time that I was spent in prison was just alone with myself and my own thoughts. I wore earplugs in my ears to block out all of the TV advertisements and random screaming that was going on in the prison, and I spent a lot of time just with myself, keeping myself company. And I realized that this person who I am has value and deserves to live her best life, and that I was enough, even though I was going through an experience that was really diminishing of me and vilifying of me.
Take me back, and pardon my Italian interpretation here, colpevole?
Colpevole.
Which means guilty, right?
Yes.
Take us back to that moment when you first heard that word and how that still potentially haunts you today.
I really was expecting to go home that day. And then when that guilty verdict came down, colpevole, everything shifted for me. It felt like the earth turned upside down and then crashed down on top of me. And I realized that the truth didn't matter, I didn't matter, and that I wasn't in this dark tunnel waiting to get my life back. This was my life. And I was in a dark room, and the only light that I could possibly find had to come from within. And so after being, acknowledged as innocent, acquitted, and released from prison, I thought perhaps I was going to get to be free. I thought I was going to go back to my life. But I really quickly realized that that life no longer existed, and that I was now, for better or for worse, the girl accused of murder. What I describe in my book is this long journey of finding a way to not feel trapped by that verdict and by that narrative.
And how did you, this book is obviously a departure from your first memoir, because this is about that return to normalcy. But not only,
normalcy.
Right. But not only did you have that label of murderer, but you also were, as we glanced over in the top, sexualized. There was Foxy Knoxy was the way many referred to you.
Right.
Forget about Amanda.
Right.
And so how did you return, as you say in quotes, to normal?
I don't think I've ever really returned to normal, and I think that that's in part due to the fact that there's this myth that was being packaged by the media and by the prosecution that was being delivered to us, the consumers, and it had my face and name on it, and that myth was that a sexualized woman is a woman who hates other women. And that was the narrative that was really at the core of the case against me, and was at the core of all of the media that was representing me as this Foxy Knoxy, sexually deviant, woman-hating slut. That's what it all came down to. And I felt very trapped by that narrative. But then I encountered other people who had been wrongly convicted and other women who had been vilified in a very similar way. And it really made me step back and think, okay, how am I potentially participating in this narrative? And that led me to interrogate my own relationship with the people who had harmed me. I started to have a relationship with my prosecutor, of all people. I did not understand why this man looked at me and saw a monster. I could not comprehend it because, again, if you look at the evidence in the case, the only thing that they were ever able to prove was the truth, which was that I lived in that house. That's it. So I reached out directly. I believe in confronting the things that we are scared of head on so that they feel less like this big scary thing that is chasing after us.
You said something that really struck me that I highlighted and wanted to bring to you. You said that freedom is not a state of mind, it's a practice.
Yes.
How
yes.
so?
In the same way that every morning that I got up in prison, I had to find something worth living for just to get through the day, I think that every day that I wake up, I have to practice being present with myself and realizing that whatever is happening outside me, I am okay, and I have the freedom to see the world clearly as it is, accept it as it is, which does not mean tolerating injustice, just really seeing it clearly for what it is, and then recognizing how I can be an effective agent in the world, how I can be a protagonist of my own life.
Amanda Knox, thank you so much for sharing that with us, and you can purchase free My Search for Meaning wherever books are sold, available today. With President Trump threatening tariffs on European wines and spirits, your next bottle of champagne from France or wine from Italy could cost much more. But even wines made right here in this country are already facing increased costs due to materials like glass and bottling equipment. They're imported from overseas. Our Jacqueline Lee traveled to California wine country to bring us this story.
It's bottling season for wineries across the country, including in Temecula Valley, California, right here at Wilson Creek Winery and Vineyards.
It is hugely cost intensive to have a winery and very low profit margins. So,
low profit margin.
Oh yeah, you don't get into this business to make money. This is a passion business. We do it because we love it.
Owner Bill Wilson gave us a tour of his operation as they bottle their famous white Cabernet Sauvignon. Notice their signature blue bottles.
People buy it just for the blue bottles. They're absolutely gorgeous.
Those glass bottles come from China, now subject to a 20% tariff. The Trump administration imposed a total 20% import tax on all goods coming from China as of March 4th.
So the 20% tariff on the blue glass from China, you are now going to look for a domestic.
We will compare, suppliers for sure, because it's tens of thousands of dollars that it costs us.
The new tariffs are raising costs for businesses all over the world, including here at home. But the wine industry in particular is reeling after President Trump threatened to impose a 200% tariff on all European wine and alcohol on April 2nd.
A 200% tariff makes EU wines basically unmarketable in the United States.
Harry Root is president and owner of Grassroots Wine in Charleston, South Carolina, a wine importer and distributor, one of more than 6,000 in the U.S. They are critical to supplying imported wine directly to restaurants and retailers all over the country.
We're faced with a big quandary. We have wine that's on the water right now that's under threat of 200% tariff if it doesn't land by April 2nd. Those are totally unpredicted, Bill. We didn't know this when we ordered that wine. We didn't know it when we put it on the boat. So for my family and for my small business, we employ 50 people. These could be like a $500,000 hit to us to pay these tariffs at 200%. Clearly, we don't have cash lying around.
Root says European wine makes up 60% of his wine sales and accounts for 75% of his gross profit. According to the U.S. Wine Trade Alliance, the U.S. imports around $5.4 billion in wine from the European Union, generating more than $24.5 billion for the U.S. economy. They say European wine is critical to the business model of hundreds of thousands of small businesses in the U.S.
So President Trump says that the tariffs would bring more jobs to the U.S., but you're saying it would do the opposite for you.
Tariffing the wine industry does nothing but hurt American jobs. U.S. companies make $4.50 for every dollar that European companies make on wine. And that grows even further when the wine gets channeled through restaurants. So we would see massive pain and vulnerability in the entire restaurant industry. I think that we would see jobs contracted in the United States if wine was drawn into a trade war.
But President Trump argues other countries have been ripping off the United States for years, imposing their own tariffs on U.S. goods. Starting in June 2018, the U.S. and European Union traded on-again, off-again retaliatory tariffs on wine and alcohol from both sides of the Atlantic. In June 2021, they agreed to a 5-year suspension of tariffs on spirits and wines.
Were you surprised when President Trump implemented these additional tariffs?
Surprise is not the right word. You know, they impose tariffs on us, and he's imposing tariffs on them. So yeah, it's a weapon, and I don't want the wine industry or any industry to be weaponized. But at the same time, I do want to compete on a level playing field.
Winemaker Christina Filippi says the trade war leads to uncertainty with costs and even threatens to snarl the supply chain, which affects production timelines.
For me, I would just kind of feel like I'm holding my breath a little bit.
The materials used in her wine production is sourced from all over the world. European barrels, stainless steel machinery, and cork, all the way down to glass from China.
You know, we've been getting it from the same places for years. And now, if the prices skyrocket, we're probably going to be looking for new sources and hoping to find them.
President Trump says this would fulfill his mission. Overseas tariffs bringing more business back to the United States.
If European wine gets so expensive, then there's a surge in demand for domestic wine. Wouldn't that be a good thing?
Well, I think that it would be potentially a good thing for U.S. wineries in the beginning, but we all kind of know supply and demand. If the supply is reduced by the elimination of European wine as a viable product in the United States, the demand is going to go up on the supply that's left. So we'll see prices rise on American wines as well.
Economists warn that an increase in production costs often lead to higher prices, with America's top CEOs warning consumers are already spending less amid concerns about a recession.
Everything gets passed on to the customer, just like a minimum price increase or $20 an hour at a hamburger stand. You're going to pass that on to the customer. You have no choice, otherwise you lose money and you're out of business.
Our thanks to Jacqueline for that. And that is our show for this hour. I'm Linsey Davis. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thank you so much for streaming with us.